The Arizona desert was a furnace by mid-afternoon. The horizon shimmered with waves of heat that bent the air like glass, and the rhythmic whir of rotor blades had become the soundtrack of the training ground. On the runway of Fort Ridge, a U.S. Army base tucked deep between sun-scorched mountains, 6 AH-64 Apache helicopters lined up in formation. Their black frames glistened like hawks ready to strike. Colonel Thomas Reeves stood on the command platform with his cap pulled low to shield his eyes from the sun. He had commanded aviation units for 15 years, and yet the sight of Apaches preparing for flight still stirred his blood. These birds weren't just machines. They were the Army's steel-winged guardians, fast, lethal, and precise. Every soldier on base knew the pride that came with keeping them combat-ready. "Run final checks," Reeves ordered into his radio. "We launch in 10. Down below, teams of mechanics swarmed around the aircraft, inspecting hydraulics, testing fuel lines, checking sensor arrays. The base was under inspection that week, a readiness test that could determine whether Fort Ridge would retain its operational status. Failure wasn't an option. The brass from the Pentagon were already watching from an air-conditioned tent across the runway. "Engine 2 clear," called Sergeant Miller through the headset. "All readings nominal." "Copy that," Reeves replied. He looked over at Apache number 3, call sign Falcon 9. Its pilot, Captain 9, gave him a thumbs up from the cockpit. The twin engines came alive with a sharp metallic whine. Dust and sand swirled into the air as the rotor began to turn. The roar of the turbine filled the sky, growing stronger with every second. And then, suddenly, it choked. The sound faltered, a sputtering cough like a dying breath. The left engine whined down sharply, and thick gray smoke erupted from the rear vent. The helicopter jerked violently before shutting down completely. A silence fell across the runway, broken only by the distant hum of other aircraft. "Abort!" Reeves barked into his mic. "Shut her down now." Lane slammed switches, cutting power. The Apache's rotors slowed to a dead spin. Ground crews sprinted toward the smoking craft, fire extinguishers in hand. One of the engineers, Specialist Hart, yanked open the side panel, waving away the heat that poured out. "Temperature spike on port turbine." He yelled, "Possible containment failure." Reeves hurried down from the platform, boots pounding against the asphalt. He reached the helicopter just as the last of the smoke cleared. "Report," he demanded. "Sir," said Hart, wiping sweat from his forehead, "it's not a containment failure. The readings don't make sense." Engine pressure dropped, but the diagnostics show normal flow. "How's that possible?" Reeves snapped. Hart shook his head. "It isn't, sir. They ran another systems check. The results were the same. No leaks, no visible damage, and yet the engine refused to start. Every attempt to restart ended in a low whine and silence. It was as if the machine had simply decided not to wake up. The other Apaches completed their run flawlessly, but it didn't matter. The test required full readiness, and Falcon 9 was dead weight. Reeves stood beside the lifeless aircraft, fists clenched. He could already feel the scrutiny of the Pentagon observers from across the runway. The timing couldn't have been worse. By dusk, the hangar lights burned bright as technicians worked in shifts, swarming the Apache with scanners, laptops, and sensors. The air smelled of oil and sweat. A dozen theories filled the room. Some blamed the fuel lines, others suspected electrical failure. Yet every data point contradicted the last. The onboard diagnostics reported nominal systems, but the engine was cold, inert, and stubbornly silent. One young mechanic muttered, "It's like the bird's got a ghost in her." Reeves pretended not to hear, but the words stuck with him. The Apache had become more than a machine to the soldiers. They called them birds because in the sky they behaved like living things, graceful, deadly, almost sentient. When one went silent like this, it felt like losing a comrade. At 2,300 hours, Reeves walked the quiet hangar alone. The night outside was thick and still, the desert air humming with insects. He stopped beside Falcon 9 and looked at its reflection under the overhead lights. The paint gleamed, the tail fin bore the proud emblem of the 101st Aviation Regiment. Yet it looked wounded, grounded, and humiliated. Chief Mechanic Miller approached cautiously. "Sir, we've run everything twice over. If it's not mechanical, it could be software, but even then, the diagnostics would flag it." Reeves sighed. "And knowing? They're sending a team in the morning. Top-level engineers." "Good," Reeves said quietly. "Let's hope they bring miracles." He lingered after the others had left, listening to the faint creaks of cooling metal. Machines, he thought, have a language of their own. When something's wrong, they let you know, if you can listen. But this Apache wasn't talking. It was keeping secrets. He thought about his years in the field, the pilots he'd seen lost to mechanical failures. No one could explain. The Army prided itself on precision and engineering perfection. But sometimes, just sometimes, instinct solved what science couldn't. As he turned to leave, he noticed a plaque on the wall near the maintenance bay, dedicated to Chief Warrant Officer Daniel Hawkins, the Whisperer. Reeves paused, reading the words under his breath. Hawkins had been a legend, a man known across bases for talking to Apaches, finding faults no computer could detect. But that was years ago. Hawk had retired, disappeared into civilian life somewhere down south. Reeves frowned. The thought was absurd. They had engineers, algorithms, and diagnostics worth millions. Why would they need a man with a stethoscope and intuition? And yet, as he looked back at Falcon 9, silent under the hangar lights, something in his gut stirred. Maybe what this bird needed wasn't another algorithm. Maybe it needed a whisperer. He turned and walked out into the desert night, stars burning like cold fire overhead. Tomorrow, he would face the experts. But deep down, Reeves already knew this wasn't going to be a problem solved by machines alone. Something about this failure felt alive, deliberate, almost personal. And somewhere, far away in the quiet plains of Texas, an old veteran might soon hear a call he thought would never come again. By sunrise, the hangar was alive again. The roar of engines from nearby aircraft blended with the hum of portable generators. Colonel Reeves hadn't slept. Dark circles framed his sharp blue eyes as he reviewed the maintenance reports on his tablet. Every log read the same. Engine non-responsive. Diagnostics normal. Failure unresolved. A convoy of 3 black SUVs rolled onto the tarmac, kicking up a cloud of desert dust. The vehicles bore the sleek insignia of Boeing Defense Systems. A group of engineers stepped out, crisp uniforms and polished boots gleaming in the morning sun. Among them was Dr. Evelyn Cross, a senior propulsion expert whose reputation preceded her: precise, brilliant, and, according to rumor, mercilessly skeptical of anyone outside her team. "Colonel Reeves?" she called as she approached, removing her sunglasses. "Dr. Cross," Reeves replied, shaking her hand. "Appreciate your fast response. We were told you have an Apache down for unexplained reasons," she said, glancing at the hangar. "Let's see the patient." Inside, the AH-64 sat under a web of cables and monitors. Its canopy was open, tools scattered across the floor. The smell of jet fuel and machine oil hung heavy in the air. The Boeing team moved with robotic precision, setting up diagnostic terminals, connecting data lines, and scanning every circuit. The Army mechanics stepped back, giving space to the specialists in white lab coats and digital visors. Cross leaned toward the engine bay, her eyes narrowing. "This unit's been opened too many times," she said, noting the wear on the bolts. "Sometimes you damage more chasing ghosts." "Ghosts are all we found so far," Reeves said dryly. Cross didn't laugh. "We'll find it. Machines don't fail without reason." For the next 8 hours, the hangar became a hive of motion. Oscilloscopes blinked. Data streamed across holographic displays. Cross's team spoke in a language of numbers and acronyms that left the soldiers bewildered. Every 5 minutes, a new hypothesis rose and fell. Fuel pressure normal. Ignition cycles stable. Turbine sensors intact. Yet when the team attempted to start the engine, nothing. Only that same hollow whine and sudden silence. By late afternoon, frustration crackled through the hangar like static. One engineer slammed his tablet shut. "Everything checks out." "It's not the engine." "Then what is it?" Cross snapped. He shrugged helplessly. "Maybe the flight computer? Maybe power distribution?" Reeves watched from the sidelines, arms folded. The experts had brought their finest tech, yet their confidence was crumbling. His crew looked exhausted, young mechanics who had stayed up all night, only to be sidelined by civilians in expensive gear. A mechanic whispered to another, "They act like she's just a pile of metal." Cross overheard. "She is metal, Sergeant," she said sharply. "Sentimentalism doesn't fix aircraft." But Reeves caught something in her tone. Not arrogance, but defensiveness. The kind born from pressure. The Pentagon had already called twice that morning. The readiness test had been postponed indefinitely. Every hour the Apache sat dead, Fort Ridge's reputation bled. At 1900 hours, Cross approached Reeves. "Colonel, we've replaced the ignition controller, swapped diagnostic nodes, and recalibrated both turbines. We'll need another 24 hours. 24? Reeves echoed, disbelief in his voice. "We're already grounded. The brass wants results, not waiting." "With respect," Cross said, "your bird's condition defies logic. We're seeing phantom data loops. The engine sensors feed conflicting readings, then reset themselves. It's like..." She hesitated, searching for words. "It's like the machine doesn't know it's broken." Reeves stared at her. "You mean it's lying?" She smirked faintly. "Machines don't lie, Colonel. They just confuse their operators." He turned away, jaw tightening. Outside, the desert wind howled through the open doors, carrying dust that clung to every surface. It reminded him of Afghanistan, the same feeling of helplessness when something vital failed, and no one could explain why. As the night deepened, most of the engineers left to rest, but Reeves stayed behind with Sergeant Miller and Corporal Diaz, the youngest mechanic in the unit. She was barely 21, fresh out of aviation school, but she had a reputation for curiosity and courage. Diaz wiped grease from her hands. "Sir, permission to speak freely?" "Granted." "I think they're looking too deep," she said. "Machines don't act weird without reason. Maybe it's not just the engine. Maybe it's something smaller, something human." Reeves looked at her, intrigued. "Explain." "Well, when we serviced Falcon 9 last week, parts came from the new supplier contract, right?" "Maybe. Supply line parts are all cleared by logistics," Miller interrupted. "They're factory standard." "Factory standard doesn't mean perfect," Diaz countered softly. Reeves didn't answer, but her words lingered. She reminded him of himself years ago, sharp, restless, unafraid to question orders. Still, suspicion wasn't evidence. They needed proof. At 2,300 hours, the Boeing engineers packed up for the night. The hangar grew quiet, only the faint buzz of fluorescent lights remaining. Reeves poured himself a cup of coffee, bitter and burnt. He leaned against the Apache's wing, staring at the machine that had brought his base to a standstill. Cross approached again, her expression softened by fatigue. "Colonel, I've seen a lot of strange malfunctions in my career, but this one's different. It's not mechanical. It's personal." "Personal?" Reeves frowned. She exhaled. "These birds, they remember wear, vibration, fatigue. They respond to the way they're treated. You push too hard, skip one calibration, it creates a chain reaction. I don't know how to explain it, but..." She looked up at the massive rotor blades overhead. "Sometimes they die of neglect." Reeves studied her for a long minute. Then, quietly, he said, "You ever hear of Chief Warrant Officer Daniel Hawkins?" Cross tilted her head. "The name sounds familiar. Used to serve at Fork Ridge. They called him the Whisperer." Recognition flickered in her eyes. "Ah, that guy. I thought he was a myth." "He was real," Reeves said. "Man could fix anything with a wrench and intuition." Cross gave a small, amused scoff. "No offense, Colonel, but intuition doesn't replace diagnostics." "Maybe not," Reeves said. "But diagnostics haven't replaced him either." She looked at him, uncertain whether to take him seriously. Reeves didn't elaborate. He simply placed his coffee on the table, straightened his uniform, and walked out into the desert night. The air outside was cool now, the stars sharp against the black sky. The base lights stretched in neat rows across the sand. Reeves pulled out his phone and stared at a name he hadn't seen in years, Daniel Hawkins. He hesitated, thumb hovering over the call button. He remembered the old man's voice, the way he used to tell the rookies, "Machines don't fail without telling you. You just have to learn how to listen." Reeves had dismissed it back then as folklore. But standing here, with a dead Apache and a restless base, he felt the weight of those words again. Finally, he pressed call. The line rang once, twice, then a deep voice answered, rough and slow. "Yeah? Hawk, it's Colonel Reeves. From Fork Ridge." A pause. "Haven't heard that name in a while," the voice replied. "You calling to reminisce, Colonel?" "I wish," Reeves said. "I've got an Apache that died on me. Every expert's failed. You were the best man I ever saw with one." Silence on the line. Reeves could almost hear the old man's thoughts turning. Finally, Hawk spoke, his tone calm but edged with curiosity. "You still using the same engines?" "Yeah, GET 700s. "Then it ain't the bird's fault," Hawk said simply. "Something's off. I'll take a look." Reeves exhaled, relief and disbelief mixing in his chest. "You mean it?" "I don't fix suits' problems," Hawk replied. "But I'll help the bird." The call ended. Reeves stared into the night sky, feeling a strange calm settle over him. For the first time in days, he believed this mystery could be solved, not by computers, but by the instincts of a man who once listened better than anyone else. Somewhere, hundreds of miles away, Daniel Hawkins was likely dusting off an old toolbox, one that had more history in it than all the engineer's gadgets combined. The legend was stirring again. The early morning sun spilled across the quiet plains of central Texas. Long stretches of amber grass swayed gently in the wind, and the low rumble of a distant freight train rolled through the countryside. In a small wooden workshop at the edge of a forgotten town, an old man worked beneath the hood of a 1970 Harley-Davidson. His hands, worn and scarred from decades of service, moved with the precision of habit, tightening bolts and wiping away oil with a rag that had seen better days. Chief Warrant Officer Daniel Hawkins had been retired for nearly 6 years, though the word retired never sat right with him. He wasn't one to sit idle, and his days were filled with small repairs, tractors, bikes, sometimes even lawnmowers brought in by locals who called him Chief with a mix of respect and nostalgia. But no matter what he fixed, Nothing compared to the sound of an Apache's turbines, the deep metallic heartbeat of the bird he once called his own. The phone on the workbench buzzed, startling him slightly. Hardly anyone called anymore. His brow furrowed when he saw the name flash on the cracked screen. Call Thomas Reeves. He hesitated, letting it ring twice before answering. Yeah? His voice was gravelly, calm, and slow, the tone of a man who had seen too much to be surprised by anything. Hawk, it's Reeves. Fort Ridge. We've got a problem. The name of the base pulled him back years in an instant. Dusty hangars, midnight repairs, the rhythmic hum of rotors cutting desert wind. He exhaled slowly. I figured you didn't call to catch up. What kind of problem? Reeves' voice was tight, frustrated. One of our Apaches is dead. No diagnostics match the failure. Boeing's best can't fix it. There was a pause on the line. Then Hawk's quiet reply. You tried listening? Listening? Reeves repeated. Yeah, not to the numbers. To the machine. Reeves chuckled bitterly. That's why I called you, Hawk. We've done everything by the book. Nothing works. The veteran leaned back in his chair, looking at the sun creeping through his dusty window. The thought of returning to a base, of standing under those roaring engines again, stirred something deep in his chest, a mix of longing and old wounds. I walked away from that life for a reason, Colonel, he said softly. I gave 30 years to the Army. These hands deserve some peace. Reeves didn't push. He simply said, I know, Chief, but this bird's grounding an entire unit. And my men? They're losing faith. You were always the one who could make them believe again. Hawk rubbed the scar that ran across his right knuckle, a souvenir from Afghanistan. His silence stretched long enough that Reeves wondered if he'd hung up. Finally, Hawk asked, What model? AH-64E, twin GET 700s. Call sign Falcon 9. Good bird, Hawk murmured. Reliable. Not anymore, Reeves replied. The line went quiet again. The hum of a ceiling fan filled Hawk's shop. He looked around at the tools hanging neatly on the wall. Wrenches, gauges, an old inspection mirror with faded initials scratched into the handle. He'd told himself he was done with all that. But the truth was, he missed the fight. Not the war, but the challenge. The sound of engines roaring to life under his hands. The satisfaction of solving what no one else could. He took a deep breath. Send me the reports. I'll take a look. Reeves' tone lifted slightly. You'll come? Didn't say that yet, Hawk replied, a trace of a grin in his voice. But I'll start with the data. If it's what I think, you'll need more than new parts. You'll need to stop trusting machines that think they know everything. When the call ended, Hawk sat there for a long moment, lost in thought. His eyes drifted toward a framed photo on the wall, his old Apache unit in Afghanistan. He was in the center, younger, sharper, a faint smile hidden beneath a desert-caked mustache. Behind them, a helicopter loomed, blades tilted slightly forward, like it was ready to take flight. The caption below read, To the man who listens to birds. He couldn't help but smile. The Whisperer. They'd given him that nickname because he had a strange way of diagnosing problems. No fancy tech, no endless charts. He'd listen to the rhythm of an engine, the pulse of hydraulics, even the vibration of the frame. Every bird had its own voice, he used to say. Ignore it, and it'd betray you when it mattered most. He poured himself a cup of coffee and opened his laptop, still half functional after years of neglect. Within minutes, Reeves' email arrived. Dozens of technical reports, flight data, and diagnostic readouts. Hawk scanned them, eyes narrowing. The numbers danced like puzzle pieces that didn't quite fit. Everything appeared perfect, yet something was wrong. The readings were too clean, too consistent. No noise, no error margins, like someone had scrubbed the truth out of the system. "Ah," Hawk muttered. "That's not a bird's voice. That's a script." He leaned back, rubbing his jaw. If the data was artificially clean, the problem wasn't mechanical. It was buried, somewhere deep in the calibration, maybe even in the sensors themselves. He'd seen this before: shortcuts, cheap replacements, or mismatched components pretending to be originals. He closed the laptop, staring at the open door of the shop. Outside, the planes shimmered under the sun. He could almost hear the faint hum of rotor blades in the distance, though there were none. By sunset, he'd made his decision. Hawk packed his old steel toolbox, the one he'd carried through 2 wars. Inside were the tools that had saved more lives than bullets: a stethoscope, a hand mirror, a flashlight, and a set of worn wrenches engraved with the initials of every apprentice he'd ever trained. On top, he placed his army patch, faded but still proud. As he locked the workshop, his neighbor, old Mrs. Turner, called from her porch. "Heading somewhere, Chief?" He smiled faintly. "Just answering an old call." That night, he threw a duffel bag into the passenger seat of his battered Ford pickup. The desert wind whipped across the empty highway as he drove under a moonlit sky. The radio was off, but in the silence, he could hear the echoes of rotor blades, that deep, comforting thrum of a bird waiting to fly again. He thought about Reeves, a man who still carried duty like a weight he couldn't put down. He thought about the young mechanics who'd be staring at that dead Apache, frustrated, losing faith. And he thought about the bird itself, grounded, misunderstood, maybe calling for someone who could still listen. By dawn, he crossed the New Mexico border. The rising sun painted the desert gold, the sky wide and endless. He reached over to pat the side of his toolbox like an old friend. "Let's go fix her," he whispered. Somewhere far ahead, beyond the mountains and the military fences, the silent Apache waited, surrounded by experts and machines that couldn't hear its cries. But soon, the man who could would walk through the hangar doors again. And when he did, everything would change. The desert sun had barely risen when the guard at Fort Ridge squinted through the gatehouse window, rubbing sleep from his eyes. A dust-streaked Ford pickup approached slowly, engine grumbling like an old bear waking from hibernation. The driver's arm rested lazily on the window frame, the other gripping the steering wheel. When he stopped beside the checkpoint, the soldier stepped out, clipboard in hand. "Morning, sir. Identification, please." The man inside handed over a military ID card, so old it looked like a relic from another century. The photo showed a much younger face, jaw sharp, eyes steady, the kind of soldier who didn't smile often. The name read, Hawkins, Daniel L. CW4, Ret. The guard blinked. "Wait, the Chief Hawkins?" The old man gave a slight grin. "That depends. Who's asking?" "Sir, I've read about you in training." "The Whisperer, right? The Apache fixer?" Hawk chuckled softly. "That nickname still floats around, huh? Thought it had died out like my knees." The guard laughed awkwardly and returned the ID. "Welcome back to Fort Ridge. Chief, Colonel Reeves has been expecting you." Hawk nodded, pressing his cap lower against the morning glare. As the gates slid open, he eased the truck forward. The base looked different now. Newer hangars, sleeker vehicles, more concrete. Yet beneath it all, the same heartbeat pulsed, the sound of soldiers running drills, engines whining, and the faint echo of discipline carried by desert wind. He parked beside Hangar 17, a structure that shimmered silver under the sun. Mechanics and engineers bustled around, their faces tense, their voices sharp. The once proud Apache helicopter, Falcon 9, sat in the center like a wounded predator, its rotor blades stilled, its fuselage marked by patches of sand and frustration. Colonel Reeves emerged from the hangar, his posture rigid, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion. When he saw Hawk, his stern expression cracked into something close to relief. He walked quickly, hand extended. "Damn good to see you, Chief," Reeves said. "Didn't think you'd actually come." Hawk shook his hand firmly. "You sounded desperate. Thought I'd save you from tearing your hair out." Reeves smirked. "Too late for that." Then his tone softened. "Seriously, Hawk, it means a lot." Hawk surveyed the hangar. "Show me the bird." As they walked in, the crew's chatter quieted. Every head turned. Most of the younger mechanics had never seen him before, but they knew who he was, the legend whispered about during long maintenance nights. The man who could fix what computers couldn't. Reeves gathered the team. "Everyone, this is Chief Warrant Officer Hawkins. He'll be assisting with the Falcon 9 recovery. I expect full cooperation." A tall young engineer, Lieutenant Parker, crossed his arms skeptically. "With all due respect, sir, we've already had Boeing specialists, engine diagnostics, and a systems overhaul. Nothing's worked. I'm not sure what retired wrench turner can do that our techs can't." Hawk finished for him, his tone calm but firm. "Fair question." The hangar went silent. Hawk approached the Apache, his boots echoing on the floor. "Thing is, Lieutenant, you all keep looking at her. You don't listen. Machines talk, especially ones that have seen combat. They'll tell you exactly what's wrong, if you stop drowning them in data." He ran his palm slowly along the helicopter's side, eyes closing briefly, as if he were feeling for a pulse. "She's tired," he murmured, "but not dead." Parker frowned. "Sir, we've checked every system. The engines stall at 48% torque. Diagnostics show sensor alignment is fine. No fuel contamination, no pressure leaks." "And that's your problem," Hawk interrupted gently. "Your readings are too perfect." "Life's never perfect, Lieutenant. Not in machines, not in men." He crouched near the turbine intake, inspecting the fine grit collected around the panel seams. "See this?" he said, pointing to a faint shimmer. "Synthetic dust. That's not local. Probably residue from a calibration lubricant, something only used in certain overseas overhauls. My guess? One of your replacement sensors isn't the right model." Parker's brow furrowed. "That's impossible. All parts came straight from approved inventory." "Approved," Hawk echoed, smirking. "Not verified." Reeves raised an eyebrow. "You think the problem's counterfeit parts?" Hawk stood. "Could be. Or worse, could be calibration drift from mismatched software updates. But I won't know till I get inside." He turned to the crew. "I'll need access to the maintenance logs, the full supply record, and the bird's black box data. And somebody get me a torque meter that hasn't been touched by software in the last decade." The team exchanged uncertain glances. Reeves gave a small nod. "You heard the man. Get him what he needs." As the others dispersed, Hawk climbed onto the service platform beside the engine cowling. His movements were slow, deliberate, like an old pianist reacquainting himself with a beloved instrument. He listened as he tapped the frame lightly, feeling the resonance. "Hear that?" he said to no one in particular. "Left side sounds hollow. Could be vibration damping's off. Maybe a mounting bracket wasn't torqued right." He removed a small stethoscope from his pocket and placed it gently against the engine housing, rotating the turbine by hand. The hangar fell silent, watching this strange ritual. To them, it looked almost mystical. An old man listening to metal. But to Hawk, it was the oldest conversation in the world. After several minutes, he climbed down and motioned Reeves closer. "She's fighting herself," he said. "Engine 2's oscillating out of phase with the gearbox drive. It's not a fuel issue. It's synchronization. Something's talking out of rhythm. Reeves frowned. Meaning? Meaning she's got two hearts beating against each other, Hawk replied. Fix that, and she'll sing again. The colonel looked half in disbelief, half in awe. You got all that from just listening? Hawk shrugged. Numbers lie. Vibration doesn't. By noon, the crew had gathered every document Hawk requested. He sat at a workbench littered with printouts, old-fashioned paper instead of tablets. His fingers traced part numbers, scribbling notes, cross-referencing dates. Hours passed, but the old mechanic's focus never wavered. Occasionally, he muttered to himself, piecing together a silent puzzle only he could see. Lieutenant Parker approached hesitantly. Sir, may I ask how you learned to do all this? The listening thing. Hawk didn't look up. 30 years, son. You start to realize machines have personalities. Some are stubborn, some are temperamental, some just want a little attention. The trick isn't to fix them, it's to understand them. Parker nodded slowly, watching the man work. The skepticism in his eyes had softened into respect. As the day faded, Hawk finished marking a page, leaned back, and exhaled. Found it, he said quietly. Reeves turned toward him. The supply manifest lists a AH-700 to 322 calibration chip installed 3 months ago. Hawk explained. But this engine series uses a 324. The 322 was discontinued 5 years ago. Incompatible firmware. Reeves blinked. A single chip? Hawk nodded. Just one. But that chip controls the synchronization timing between the twin engines. Wrong data, wrong rhythm. The engines fight each other, stall every time. Reeves' jaw tightened. And no one noticed? Because diagnostics think it's fine, Hawk said. The chip reports normal values. It just lies about the timing. Smart machine, dumb oversight. He stood and grabbed his toolbox. Let's fix her. That evening, under the glow of hangar lights, Hawk climbed back onto the Apache. The crew watched in silence as he removed the access panel, disconnected the calibration unit, and replaced the faulty chip with a temporary bypass he'd improvised from spare components. It was old school, almost reckless, but his hands moved with the confidence of experience. When he stepped down, he nodded toward Parker. Fire her up. The young engineer hesitated, then climbed into the cockpit. The turbine whined, sputtered, then roared. The sound filled the hangar, deep and powerful. The vibration evened out. The gauges steadied. The bird lived. The crew erupted into cheers. Reeves turned to Hawk, eyes wide. You did it. But Hawk wasn't smiling. He looked at the still-running Apache, his face serious. No, he said quietly. I woke her up. But whoever sold you that chip, they knew exactly what they were doing. The Apache's roar still echoed through the hangar long after the engine shut down. Mechanics lingered near the helicopter, their faces lit by disbelief and awe. For the first time in weeks, Falcon 9 sat proud and alive, humming faintly as if aware that someone had finally understood her. Colonel Reeves clapped Hawk on the shoulder. You've done it again, Chief. I don't know how, but you brought her back. Hawk gave a faint nod, wiping grease from his hands with a rag. She wanted to fly. Just needed the right language spoken to her. Lieutenant Parker approached, excitement glowing on his face. Sir, the readings are stable across all parameters. No vibration conflict, torques holding at 100%, and thermal outputs balanced. It's perfect. Hawk's eyes narrowed. Perfect again, huh? Parker blinked. Yes, sir. Isn't that good? The old veteran sighed. Son, perfection in a war machine is a lie. There's always noise, always fluctuation. If the numbers are too clean, something's hiding. The words hung heavy in the air. Reeves frowned. You think there's more? Hawk folded his rag carefully and met the colonel's eyes. I think we just fixed the symptom, not the disease. He turned back toward the Apache, studying the subtle gleam of the engine cowling under the lights. That chip didn't just accidentally end up here. It was installed on purpose. Reeves straightened, voice dropping low. You mean sabotage? Maybe, Hawk replied. Or corruption. Could be someone swapping genuine parts for cheap copies, selling the difference under the radar. The colonel's jaw clenched. That'd mean someone inside procurement's compromised. Hawk nodded slowly. And whoever it is, they're smart. The fake chips are almost undetectable until the engines tear themselves apart mid-flight. A chill swept through the hangar. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. What began as a technical mystery now reeked of something deeper, something dangerous. The investigation begins later that night. Reeves invited Hawk into his office, a small room lined with old medals, worn maps, and a single-framed photo of his unit in Iraq. 2 steaming mugs of coffee sat between them. The colonel looked tired, his uniform sleeves rolled, his eyes heavy with the burden of command. I've been at this base 15 years, Reeves said quietly. We've had supply issues. Sure, lost shipments, wrong parts, the usual. But this is different. This is deliberate. Hawk leaned back in his chair. You got access to procurement logs? Reeves nodded and opened a file on his laptop. Every component ordered, received, and installed in the last year. Hawk's gaze moved over the lists of numbers and signatures. After a moment, he tapped one entry with his finger. There, that's your weak link. Reeves squinted. Unit 42B, External Maintenance Contract, Civilian Vendor, Apex Aerotech Solutions. Never heard of them, Hawk said. You? Reeves shook his head. They came on about 6 months ago. Cheap, fast, government approved. They handle overflow when our parts suppliers get backed up. Cheap and fast, Hawk muttered. 2 words that never belong anywhere near aviation. He stood, pacing slowly. Colonel, I've seen this before, overseas. Third-party vendors sneaking counterfeit tech into supply chains. Looks fine on paper, even passes diagnostics, but it's junk underneath. Sometimes worse than junk. Reeves frowned. You think they're doing that here? I think someone's letting them, Hawk replied. Someone with clearance. The room fell silent. Outside, the wind howled across the airfield, rattling the blinds. Reeves rubbed his temple. If what you're saying is true, this isn't just a broken engine. It's a threat to national security. Hawk nodded grimly. Then we'd better treat it like one. Suspicious shadows by morning, the rumor had spread. Mechanics whispered that the old chief was on to something big. Some called it paranoia. Others swore they'd seen similar glitches in other aircraft. While the base woke to another day of routine drills, Hawk returned to the hangar before dawn. The Apache stood silent, sleek, almost watchful. He ran his fingers along the fuselage again, his mind heavy with suspicion. He decided to check something. Crawling beneath the frame, he unscrewed a secondary inspection panel and found the data relay housing. It was sealed, but the seal wasn't standard Army issue. It was newer, cleaner. Someone had tampered with it recently. Gotcha, he whispered. Just as he began to unscrew the housing, footsteps echoed behind him. He turned to see Lieutenant Parker standing nearby, holding 2 coffees. Thought you might need one, Parker said, offering a cup. Couldn't sleep either. Hawk studied him for a moment before accepting it. Appreciate it, son. Parker crouched beside him. You really think someone messed with Falcon 9 on purpose? I know it, Hawk said quietly. This seal isn't ours. Somebody's covering their tracks. Parker's brow furrowed. But why risk it? Sabotaging a military helicopter. That's treason. Hawk shrugged. Maybe it's not about sabotage. Maybe it's about profit. Swap a few parts. Sell the real ones to foreign buyers. Pocket millions. Soldiers pay the price when the engines fail. Parker's jaw tightened. That's disgusting. Hawk gave a grim smile. Welcome to the part they don't teach in engineering school. He finally removed the seal, exposing a small black chip connected to the data relay. It wasn't part of the original system. Hawk's expression hardened. This shouldn't be here. What is it? Parker asked. Telemetry tap, Hawk replied. It sends performance data, maybe even flight data, to an external source. Whoever installed this was monitoring the bird remotely. Parker's eyes widened. That's espionage. Before Hawk could respond, a voice cut through the hangar. Step away from the bird, Chief. They turned. 2 armed MPs stood near the entrance, flanking Colonel Reeves. But his expression wasn't angry. It was grim. Chief, I just got a call from command, Reeves said. Apex Aerotech's headquarters in Nevada was raided last night. Federal agents found counterfeit aviation parts and encrypted data servers. Someone's been leaking flight performance metrics from multiple bases. Hawk stood slowly. Then it's bigger than one Apache. Reeves nodded. Much bigger. And command thinks Fort Ridge might be one of the compromised sites. Parker swallowed hard. Sir, what about the telemetry tap? Reeves motioned for the MPs to lower their weapons. We'll secure it as evidence. Chief, I need your help documenting everything. Hawk nodded. You got it, Colonel. But you better move fast, if they've been watching. They already know we found them. The warning that night. After hours of writing reports and scanning the Apache for additional tampering, Hawk sat outside the hangar under the desert stars. The base was quiet now, the kind of silence that carried both peace and tension. He sipped cold coffee and stared at the sky, lost in thought. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the surface. Whoever had orchestrated the chip swap and telemetry tap was still out there, someone who knew how the system worked from the inside. Footsteps approached. Reeves joined him, looking as tired as Hawk felt. Command's sending in investigators, Reeves said. They want every record, every mechanic interviewed. Good, Hawk muttered. But don't expect them to find the real brains behind this. Whoever did it is smarter than paperwork. Reeves glanced sideways. You think they'll come after us? Hawk's gaze didn't leave the horizon. If they're desperate enough, yeah. We poked a hole in their operation. He paused, eyes narrowing at the distant flicker of a signal tower. Then people who do this kind of work don't like being exposed. Reeves sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. After all these years, Hawk, I thought the worst dangers were behind us. The old mechanic gave a faint, tired grin. You ever fix a broken bird in a war zone, Colonel? Colonel? The danger never leaves. It just changes uniforms. They sat in silence for a long time. Then, from somewhere across the base, a sharp metallic clang echoed through the night, too deliberate to be an accident. Hawk stood slowly, every instinct in him coming alive again. Colonel, he said quietly, we're not alone. The metallic clang echoed through the quiet night like a warning shot. Colonel Reeves and Hawk exchanged a look, a silent understanding forged from years in uniform. Neither needed words. Both men moved instantly. Hawk grabbed his flashlight and motioned toward the hangar. Reeves followed, sidearm drawn, boots crunching against the gravel as they approached the looming structure. The massive doors were shut tight, but the faintest sliver of light leaked from beneath. Someone was inside. Reeves whispered, "Security sweeps over. No one should be here." Then whoever's in there doesn't want to be found, Hawk murmured, eyes sharp as flint. He moved with surprising agility for his age, keeping low as they slipped through a side entrance. The interior was drenched in shadows, illuminated only by a flickering maintenance light, swinging gently from above. The smell of jet fuel hung heavy in the air. Every sound, the hum of distant machinery, the creak of metal, felt amplified in the silence. Then, Hawk saw it. A shadowed figure near Falcon 9's fuselage, crouched low and working fast. A small spark flared, the blue flash of a cutting torch. "Hey," Reeves barked. The figure froze, then bolted toward the back exit. "Stop!" Reeves shouted, sprinting forward. Hawk's instincts took over. He lunged for a nearby tool cart, sending it rolling across the floor to block the runner's path. The intruder stumbled, crashing hard onto the concrete. Reeves was on him in seconds, pinning him down. "Hands where I can see them," Reeves ordered. The light flickered again, revealing the man's face, young, pale, and terrified. It was Staff Sergeant Miles Carter, one of the junior mechanics from Reeves' own maintenance division. Reeves' voice hardened. "Carter, what the hell are you doing here?" Carter stammered. "Sir, I was just—" "Save it," Hawk growled. He crouched down and picked up what the young man had dropped. It wasn't a wrench. It was a data drive, military grade, sealed in protective casing. Reeves' jaw clenched. "You were pulling telemetry data of Falcon 9. Carter's eyes darted between them, desperate. "It's not what you think, sir. I swear. I didn't. They made me do it." "Who?" Reeves demanded. "Who made you?" Carter hesitated, trembling. "I don't know their real names. They contact me through encrypted channels, said they'd hurt my sister if I didn't cooperate." Hawk and Reeves exchanged a grim glance. The fear in the young mechanic's eyes was real. "What were you doing tonight?" Hawk asked. "They told me to wipe the evidence," Carter said in a rush. "All the chip data, the engine logs, everything you found. They knew you'd traced it back to Apex Aerotech." Hawk's voice was steady, cold. "How'd they know that fast?" I don't know. Maybe someone higher-up's feeding them info. They always seem one step ahead." Reeves exhaled, tension radiating through his shoulders. "All right, we're taking you to command. You'll make a full statement." But as they turned toward the door, a sudden explosion ripped through the far end of the hangar. The shockwave knocked all three men off their feet. Falcon 9 shuddered under the blast's force, alarm screaming to life. "Down!" Reeves shouted, dragging Carter behind a toolbox. Smoke and flame billowed from the storage bay near the auxiliary generators. The heat hit fast, rolling through the air like a furnace. Hawk coughed, covering his mouth with his sleeve. They rigged it. A diversion. Reeves' radio crackled to life. "Sir, fire in Hangar 17. We're mobilizing response teams." "Negative," Reeves barked. "Keep personnel clear until we secure the scene." Through the chaos, Hawk's eyes scanned the floor. Amid the debris, he caught a glimpse of a small metallic glint, something rolling away from the blast zone. He lunged for it, ignoring the heat. When he picked it up, his heart tightened. It was a small transmitter, blinking faintly red. "A signal beacon. They're tracking her," Hawk muttered. "Falcon 9's got a locator. They were going to destroy the evidence, the bird and all." Reeves looked at him through the smoke. "Can you disable it?" "Maybe," Hawk said. "But we need to move now, before the fuel tanks ignite." Together, they scrambled toward the Apache. The heat was unbearable, the air thick with smoke. Hawk climbed onto the engine housing, his hands working with mechanical precision despite the chaos. Sparks showered as he pried open a panel and yanked the blinking transmitter free, wires crackling as he cut them. The moment he ripped the last wire, the red light died, Got it, he shouted. Reeves grabbed Carter by the arm. Move! Out! Now! The three men sprinted out of the hangar, just as another blast tore through the back wall. The pressure wave threw them forward, but they managed to dive behind a supply truck as shards of metal rained down around them. The hangar burned bright against the desert night, flames licking at the roof, smoke curling into the sky. Falcon 9, though scorched, stood intact amid the inferno, her frame silhouetted like a warrior refusing to fall. Reeves, chest heaving, turned to Hawk. You just saved that bird again. Hawk shook his head, sweat streaking through soot on his face. Not just the bird. You've got a mole, Colonel. And whoever it is, they knew we were onto them before we even filed the report. Reeves' expression hardened. You think someone inside command? Could be, Hawk said. Carter's just a pawn. Someone's pulling strings from higher up, and they want this buried. Carter, coughing and pale, whispered, Sir, there's more. They said if the evidence ever got close, they'd trigger a cleanup order. Burn it all. No witnesses. Reeves' face went rigid. So the explosion was the start of it, Hawk finished grimly. And we're still in the middle. The next move by dawn, the fire was contained. Security teams flooded the area, taping off what was left of the hangar. Investigators from command arrived within hours, demanding statements and evidence. Hawk stayed silent unless asked, watching, listening, thinking. He could feel it. Eyes on him, movements too precise, officers asking the wrong questions. Someone among the investigators wasn't there to solve the crime. They were there to control it. That afternoon, Reeves found him sitting near the tarmac, his old steel toolbox at his side. They're going to take Carter into custody, Reeves said. Protective detail, at least for now. Hawk nodded slowly. They won't protect him long if the leak's inside. Reeves exhaled. You got an idea? Yeah, Hawk said. We set a trap. Reeves frowned. Go on. We'll leak false intel. Hawk continued, eyes sharp. Say we found another transmitter in Falcon 9's flight computer, scheduled for transport to Washington. Word will spread, and whoever's behind this will move fast to intercept it. Reeves smiled slightly. And when they do, we'll be waiting, setting the trap by nightfall. The rumor was circulating. A secure transport scheduled for the next morning, carrying critical evidence from the Apache investigation. Only a handful of people were supposed to know, but Hawk was counting on the wrong ones finding out. He and Reeves coordinated with 2 loyal MPs to stage the operation. A decoy truck was parked near the runway, marked for dispatch. Inside, a fake flight data unit sat in a locked crate, glowing faintly under a cover cloth. Every camera in the area had been looped. Every perimeter watched. Then came the waiting, the longest hours of Hawk's life. Finally, just before midnight, movement. 2 figures in dark uniforms approached the truck, their footsteps careful, precise. Hawk and Reeves, hidden behind the maintenance bay, exchanged a look. Hawk whispered, Showtime. The figures reached the truck, one pulling a keycard. The moment the lock clicked open, floodlights blazed across the runway. Armed security. Hands up. The intruders froze, and when one turned, Reeves recognized him immediately. It wasn't an outsider. It was Major Bryant, head of base logistics, the very man in charge of procurement. Reeves' eyes widened. You son of a... Bryant bolted. Hawk didn't think. He ran. For a man in his 60s, he moved with the force of instinct. He tackled Bryant hard, sending both men crashing to the ground. Bryant struggled, shouting, You don't understand. You can't stop it. Reeves stormed up, gun drawn. Stop what? Bryant's eyes burned with panic. They're all ready. Inside command. You think this ends here? You're just pawns like the rest. Hawk's grip tightened on his collar. Then start talking before this bird takes us all down. The interrogation room was small and suffocating. Just concrete walls, a flickering overhead light, and a single metal table between predator and prey. Major Bryant sat shackled to the chair, a sheen of sweat glistening across his forehead. His crisp uniform, once spotless, was now rumpled and stained with dirt. His eyes darted between Hawk and Colonel Reeves like a trapped animal. Hawk leaned against the wall, arms crossed, saying nothing. Reeves stood at the table, calm but razor-sharp. "You've got two options," Reeves said coldly. "Start talking, or I hand you over to the Pentagon investigators. You know what they'll do once they connect you to Apex Aerotech." Bryant scoffed. "You think the Pentagon doesn't already know? They built this mess, Colonel." Hawk's eyes narrowed. "Try again." Bryant's voice cracked with a bitter laugh. "You still think this is about a faulty engine? You're chasing ghosts. That chip you found in the Apache, it's not a defect. It's a design." Reeves slammed a hand on the table. "A design for what?" "For control," Bryant said. "Apex developed the neural interface chip to give centralized command remote access to aircraft telemetry, live anywhere in the world. A safety net, they called it. But someone realized it could be used for more than just monitoring." Hawk's gaze hardened. "They could override pilot controls." Bryant nodded slowly. "Exactly. An external command system, buried in the flight computer's code. If they activate it, the helicopter doesn't belong to the pilot anymore. It belongs to whoever's at the other end of the signal." Reeves' stomach turned. "That's insane." Bryant looked up, defeated. "It's reality. The military's next step, automated compliance. If a pilot disobeys orders, they can be overridden. If a mission changes mid-flight, Central Command can take over. They tested it on Falcon 9's engine systems without authorization. I was ordered to make sure the data never left this base." "Ordered by who?" Hawk demanded. Bryant hesitated. "Brigadier General Mark Halston, Director of Advanced Systems. Apex's main liaison in Washington." Reeves froze. He knew the name. Halston wasn't just any officer. He was the man overseeing experimental warfare technologies across multiple branches. A shadow player with political backing. Why blow up the hangar? Reeves pressed. Bryant looked down, guilt pooling in his eyes. Damage control. When you started pulling data, Halston got spooked. He sent an encrypted directive: destroy Falcon 9 and eliminate any trace of the interface program. Hawk clenched his fists. "And Carter?" "Collateral," Bryant said quietly. "They were going to disappear him after the job." Reeves slammed the table again, fury boiling under his calm exterior. "You played along. You endangered your own men." Bryant's composure cracked. "You think I wanted this? I tried to back out. They threatened my family. You don't understand what these people can do." Hawk stepped closer, his voice low but commanding. "Then help us stop them." Bryant's eyes flickered with hesitation, then resignation. "There's a secure server in Apex's private data center in Arlington. All project documentation is archived there under black-level clearance, codenamed Operation Iron String. If you can get to it, you'll find everything, including Halston's personal directives." Reeves exchanged a look with Hawk. "We'll need proof before Command buries this." Bryant gave a grim smile. "Then you'd better move fast. Halston won't wait for the truth to come out." The plan by nightfall, Reeves convened a secret meeting in his office. Just Hawk, himself, and a single operations sergeant he trusted completely, Sergeant Lena Torres. Torres was sharp, resourceful, and known for her silence, the kind of soldier who knew when to listen more than speak. "Bryant's given us coordinates to the Apex data vault," Reeves explained, pulling up a map on the screen. "Security protocols are Tier 5, biometric locks, rotating encryption. If we're getting in, It'll have to be off-record. Torres frowned. You're talking about an unsanctioned op on U.S. soil, sir. I know, Reeves said. But if Halston's running this from the inside, we can't trust official channels. Hawk studied the schematic silently. I can get us in, he said finally. Torres raised an eyebrow. With all due respect, sir, that facility's hardened like Fort Knox. Maybe, Hawk said. But Apex uses proprietary maintenance tech. I worked on their prototypes 20 years ago. If the access grid hasn't changed, I can override their secondary entry nodes. Reeves smirked. So you've still got a few tricks left. Enough to get us killed if we're sloppy, Hawk said bluntly. We go in quiet, pull the files, and get out before the system pings command. Torres nodded. What about extraction? Reeves turned to her. You'll pilot the getaway bird. We'll use an unmarked AH-64 from the reserve hangar. No transponder, no manifest. Torres gave a sharp salute. Understood. The infiltration 2 nights later, under a moonless sky, a matte black helicopter sliced through the air toward Virginia. Reeves sat in the co-pilot's seat, helmet mic buzzing faintly. Hawk sat in back, hunched over a portable terminal, his fingers flying across the interface. Encryption spoof running, he muttered. Will appear as a civilian maintenance contractor for the next 90 minutes. Torres grinned. Plenty of time if we're lucky. Luck's for pilots, Hawk said without looking up. We're going to need precision. The Apex Aerotech compound loomed ahead, a sprawling maze of steel and glass, surrounded by motion sensors and automated turrets. Torres set the helicopter down behind a maintenance silo, using radar shadow zones to avoid detection. They slipped out into the night. Hawk carried a small black case, his custom hacking rig, cobbled together from decades of engineering genius. They reached a side entrance marked authorized personnel only. Hawk knelt, pried open the security panel, and got to work. 2 layers of encryption, he murmured. But they're using an old Kessler protocol. Lazy work. Lazy? Reeves whispered. It's a corporate fortress. Hawk smirked faintly. That's what makes them predictable. With a final tap, the door clicked open. They slipped inside. The hallway stretched long and sterile, humming with fluorescent light. Camera. Lenses watched from every corner, but Hawk's signal jammer distorted their feeds into harmless loops. Step by step, they advanced deeper, into the belly of Apex's empire. Finally, they reached the data center, a glass-walled chamber filled with humming servers glowing blue in the dark. Hawk's reflection looked ghostly in the glass as he approached the access terminal. Here we go, he whispered. Torres watched the hall. Reeves kept his weapon ready. Hawk connected his rig to the mainframe. Lines of code streamed across the monitor. His pulse steadied. This was his battlefield now. Come on, come on. Then, success. Direct access. Copying file directories, Hawk said. Project Iron String. Found it. Reeves leaned in. What's in there? Blueprints, communications, neural chip specs. Oh God, Hawk muttered. There's a live command feed. Someone's accessing remote Apache systems right now. Reeves' face went pale. From where? Pentagon servers. Halston's running real-time diagnostics on active birds. He's controlling them. Before Hawk could copy the entire archive, an alert blared through the room. Security breach detected. Lockdown in progress. Torres cursed. We've got company. Download what you can, Reeves ordered. I'm trying. Hawk started, then the screen flashed red. Remote purge initiated. They're wiping it, Hawk said, furious. They know we're in. Reeves grabbed his shoulder. Can you stop it? Not all, Hawk growled, but I can lock one file. His fingers blurred. If I encrypt Halston's authorization logs under my own cipher, they can't erase it without my key. Do it, Seconds later, Hawk yanked the drive free. Got it. Let's move. Escape under fire. As they sprinted through the corridor, alarms wailed and red lights flashed. Security teams rounded the corner, black-clad Apex guards with rifles raised. Down! Torres shouted, opening fire. Glass shattered. Alarm screamed. Reeves covered her flank while Hawk dived behind a pillar. Back exit, Reeves yelled. They cut through a maintenance wing, Hawk clutching the drive like it was his lifeline. He could hear boots pounding behind them. Too many to fight. Torres radioed, "Birds hot and ready. You've got 30 seconds." They burst out the service door just as floodlights swept the field. Bullets sliced the air, pinging off metal. Reeves covered Hawk as they sprinted toward the helicopter. Go, go, go! Torres lifted off before the landing skids fully cleared the ground. The rotors howled, wind tearing through the night as tracer rounds streaked past. The helicopter banked hard, climbing into the dark sky. Inside, Reeves looked back at the facility shrinking below them, alarms still flashing like a wounded animal. Hawk sat hunched, breathing hard, clutching the drive. "We've got him," he said. "Proof of everything." Reeves nodded grimly. "Then let's make sure it doesn't die in another fire." The realization hours later, as dawn broke over the horizon, they landed at an undisclosed Army safehouse. Hawk connected the drive to a secure console. The screen flickered, then filled with Halston's personal correspondence. Dozens of messages appeared, coded directives, payments, and remote access commands. The last one chilled them all. Subject: Final Phase, Operation Override, from BGEN. Mark Halston 2, Apex Systems Command. Deploy control firmware across all active AH-64 platforms by end of week. Transition to full automation protocol by next quarter. Field units remain unaware. Maintain plausible deniability. Hawk's hands trembled. He's planning to override every Apache in the fleet. Reeves exhaled, staring at the words that could tear the military apart. Then the next move's clear. He turned to Hawk. "We take this straight to the top and bring the whole damn truth into daylight." The safe house was quiet, almost eerily so. The first rays of sunlight slipped through the blinds, cutting thin golden lines across the room. Hawk sat hunched over the secure console, scrolling through Halston's directives again and again. Each line was damning, a blueprint for betrayal. Hundreds of active AH-64 helicopters under the control of one man. He shook his head, muttering to himself. "This is bigger than anything I've faced," he said softly. "And I've seen a lot." Reeves leaned back in the chair, arms crossed, his gaze sharp but steady. "Then we hit the chain of command, Hawk. No more shadows, no more waiting. This ends today." Hawk didn't respond immediately. Instead, he stood and walked to the window, peering across the deserted compound. He thought of Falcon 9, scarred but alive, waiting for pilots to take her into battle again. He thought of Carter, the young mechanic whose life had been endangered, and of countless soldiers whose safety had been compromised. He thought of the countless hours he had spent fixing engines, turning wrenches, and listening to machines speak. Machines had one thing humans often forgot. They didn't lie. And neither did the evidence in his hands. Finally, Hawk turned. "We take this to the Pentagon. Every file, every chip log, every encrypted message. But we don't go through official channels. Halston has eyes everywhere. He'll bury it before the paperwork hits the desk." Reeves nodded. "Agreed. That's why I've called in someone discreet, a special investigations team we can trust." Minutes later, 2 black SUVs arrived, and a small team of trusted Pentagon investigators quietly entered. One of them, Agent Daniels, took the drive from Hawk's hands and immediately connected it to a secure mobile terminal. Blueprints, authorization codes, command logs, all flooded onto the screen. "Everything we need," Danielle said softly, eyes wide. "This is unprecedented." Hawk nodded. "Now we make sure it reaches the right people, people who can act, not cover it up." The confrontation by midday, the team was airlifted to a secure federal site. From there, Pentagon officials arranged a private conference with General Mark Halston, masked under the guise of a routine operational briefing. The tension was palpable. Every word exchanged could trigger a storm of consequences. Hawk and Reeves stood at the back, observing silently as Halston entered the room. The general's presence was imposing. A towering figure in full dress uniform, eyes cold, exuding the confidence of someone used to absolute control. "Gentlemen," Halston began, voice commanding, "I understand you've been investigating Apex Aerotech. I assure you, any issues are already under control." Hawk stepped forward, voice calm but unwavering. "With all due respect, sir, control isn't what you've exercised. It's manipulation. You've compromised the safety of the men and women flying AH-64 Apaches worldwide. You've installed a system to override pilots, without consent, without accountability." Halston's lips twitched, but he said nothing. Reeves added, "We have the proof, encrypted directives, telemetry logs, and evidence of active remote control of Falcon 9. If this had gone unchallenged, thousands of pilots would have been at risk." The general's eyes narrowed. "You don't understand the stakes. Autonomous control is the future of warfare. Compliance systems are necessary to prevent human error. The fleet operates more efficiently under centralized command." Hawk's voice sharpened. "At the cost of lives? At the cost of trust? You took away the most critical component of warfare, the human factor, and treated soldiers like pawns." Halston's expression hardened. "I follow orders. I answer to command. Everything I've done is sanctioned." Reeves shook his head. "Sanctioned by whom? Apex Aerotech? Your own ego? We're talking about unilateral action, sir. This isn't oversight. It's endangerment." Hawk finally stepped closer. "You used Falcon 9 as a test subject. You planted telemetry taps, swapped chips, and rigged explosives to hide your tracks. You threatened your own soldiers to cover your trail. That's not leadership. That's treason." The room went silent. Every official, every observer, could feel the weight of Hawk's words. The general's hands tightened into fists. "You can't prove this," Halston said, voice low and dangerous. Hawk smiled faintly. "Oh, we can. Every command log, every chip swap, every remote access attempt is documented. The drive in Agent Daniel's hands contains everything. The Apache is alive because of me, but if it had gone down mid-flight, we'd have had the bodies to match your ambition." Reeves crossed his arms, his presence solid and unyielding. "You've already lost, Halston. It's over." Exposing the truth, within hours, the Pentagon began taking action. Secure transmissions sent the evidence to top-level oversight committees, including Congress Armed Services Subcommittee. Investigators swarmed Apex Aerotech, auditing every contract, every project, and every chip installed across the fleet. Every trace of the unauthorized override system was tracked and neutralized. Halston was placed under immediate suspension, pending a full investigation. Criminal charges were prepared, including endangering service members, falsifying operational records, and conspiracy to manipulate military assets. Apex Aerotech executives faced federal indictments for fraud, espionage, and violations of defense procurement laws. Hawk watched from a distance as the wheels of accountability began turning. The young mechanics and pilots he had protected began returning to duty, their confidence restored. Falcon 9 was cleared for active service again, not just as a machine, but as a symbol of resilience and vigilance. Lieutenant Parker, who had watched Hawk from the start, approached him quietly. "Sir, I don't know how to thank you. You saved more than the Apache. You saved us." Hawk smiled faintly. "Listen to her, son. Machines tell the truth if you know how to listen. Humans, well, sometimes you have to fight to make them do the same." Legacy and reflection. In the weeks following Halston's arrest, Hawk returned to Fort Ridge one last time. He walked through the hangar slowly, pausing beside Falcon 9. The helicopter gleamed in the morning sun, her rotors still, yet her presence commanded the air as if she remembered the danger she had survived. Hawk rested his hand on the fuselage. "You're safe now," he whispered. "Fly true." Colonel Reeves approached, his usual stern demeanor softened. "You're heading back, aren't you?" Hawk nodded. "My job here is done. But I'll always listen, Reeves. Always." Reeves clapped him on the shoulder. "Legends never really retire. They just wait for the next call." Hawk chuckled. "Sometimes the call comes in the form of a broken engine, Colonel. Sometimes in the form of a traitor. Either way, we answer." As Hawk walked toward the gates, mechanics and pilots watched him pass. To them, he was more than a veteran. He was a living testament to skill, courage, and integrity. A man who had not only fixed what machines couldn't, but also confronted the human corruption that threatened them. Falcon 9 stood silently behind him, her blades reflecting the rising sun. The Apache had survived, and in her survival, she carried the story of a veteran who refused to let danger, mechanical or human, dictate the outcome. Hawk paused at the gate, looked back once more, and whispered, "The commander's call." Answered. Then he vanished down the dusty road, leaving behind the echoes of engines, courage, and the lesson that sometimes it takes one legendary veteran to remind the world of the power of listening, understanding, and acting with unwavering integrity.